Good morning, everyone. We're about to get started. If you could find your way to your seats, we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for being here. Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please take your seats? We are going to get started. It's obvious this will be a great day. You're a very well-behaved and large crowd, so thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is an exciting day, and it's the culmination of a lot of work, and yet it's only just the beginning. My name is Scott Spradling. It's an honor to be here, and I'd like to just get things started by introducing our host this morning, the Speaker of the House, Sean Jasper.
Good morning. I feel a little strange up here. I don't have a gavel. I don't know quite what to do without it. I am the House Speaker, Sean Jasper, the legislative leader of the 400-member House of Representatives. On behalf of all my colleagues, I'd like to welcome you to Representatives Hall for this event. In this room, policy decisions are made that impact the entire state. As elected lawmakers, we are stewards of New Hampshire. Although we represent every possible geographic and political background, we work to make the best possible decisions to benefit the families, businesses, all of those who live, work, and play in this great state. As you know, it's campaign season in New Hampshire, so it's fitting that we gather here today to launch a campaign of a different type. It is an effort everyone can embrace and support. This is a campaign designed to raise awareness around an issue that affects us all. Right now in New Hampshire, nearly 1 in 5 adults has a diagnosable mental health condition. Yet, too often, families, friends, co-workers don't reach out for assistance, even though help is available right now. When problems such as this are not discussed, are not addressed with an air of openness and acceptance, they don't get resolved. Mental illness is at the root of many issues and debates we have at the State House, from criminal justice to health care, from family law to the state budget. This topic is at the heart of many discussions. But too seldom, it is not being discussed in our communities. Today, that changes. Today, we will work together to change direction. Thank you. At this point, I have the honor of introducing our governor, Maggie Hassan.
Thank you very much. Please, everyone, be seated. Thank you, Speaker Jasper, for the introduction and for your introductory words as well. Thank you, Justice Broderick and Peter Evers, and Dr. Barbara Van Dahlen, founder of this wonderful campaign to change direction. It is also great to be here with my colleagues, Senator Shaheen, Congresswoman Kuster, Congressman Guinta, Senate President Morse. I noticed that the Attorney General and Commissioner Wren, and I expect a number of other members of the executive branch leadership, are also here in attendance as well. I know we have many elected officials in the room, state senators and state representatives. I thank you for your commitment and work across the aisle on this issue. I know we are also joined by mental health advocates and providers, families, and people living with mental illness. I thank you for being here. I thank you for your advocacy. I thank you for standing up for yourselves and others. As everyone in this room knows, addressing our strained mental health system is a pressing challenge facing families, healthcare providers, police officers, and communities. And as we work to strengthen community-based mental health, we must also focus on removing the stigma and increasing understanding about mental illness. People with mental illness are our friends, our family members, and our neighbors who are simply in need of appropriate care, and they must be able to access that care before they reach a point of crisis. By helping the public better understand mental illness and encouraging all citizens to pay attention to their emotional well-being, we can go a long way toward ensuring that we treat behavioral health just like any other health issue. That's why I'm so excited to be here today for the launch of the Campaign to Change Direction New Hampshire, the first statewide effort of this national initiative. Through this campaign, we will work together to change the culture of mental health, which is critical to ensuring that all of those in need receive the care and the support that they need. That's what I'm focused on as governor. And we've made real bipartisan progress over the last 3 years to strengthen community-based mental health and move towards a system where all providers have the training, capacity, and expertise to effectively treat those with mental illness, just as they treat chronic conditions, injuries, or other illnesses. Based on what I heard from Granite Staters from all walks of life in my first campaign for governor, we have made reinvigorating and strengthening our community-based mental health system a priority. It was a priority in our first budget, and our commitment to strengthen community-based mental health services in 2013 also led to a landmark mental health settlement between the state, the federal government, and New Hampshire residents with mental illness. In our most recent fiscally responsible bipartisan budget, we provided funding to continue implementing that landmark settlement agreement. This is allowing us to increase mobile crisis teams and community-based ACT teams, including teams specifically for children. And we are expanding community-based housing and providing peer support, family support, and employment services. Our budget also funded the new crisis unit at New Hampshire Hospital to help relieve overcrowded hospital emergency rooms. Staffing shortages have delayed the unit's opening, but the Executive Council and I recently approved pay raises for nurses, and we expect the unit to open up this summer. In addition, we created a new division of behavioral health earlier this year, which will help integrate the state's behavioral health system and unify the state's response to mental health and substance misuse, which we know can often co-occur. And we came together across party lines to reauthorize the bipartisan New Hampshire Health Protection Program, which has provided behavioral health and substance misuse services to thousands of Granite Staters. Many of you in this room were critical to making reauthorization of our expansion program a reality, and I want to thank you for your efforts. As we continue working to strengthen community-based health and ensure that those with mental health needs receive the right care at the right time and in the right place, we will also continue building on our comprehensive approach in the fight against substance misuse to support law enforcement and strengthen prevention, treatment, and recovery efforts. Each of these individual efforts represents significant progress, but we know that there is more work to do. In New Hampshire, we have a strong tradition of inclusiveness, leading efforts to end discrimination and bring people out of institutions and into the community. As Granite Staters, we understand that when we fully include all members of our community, we unleash the talent, strengths, and energy of our people, which in turn strengthens every aspect of our society. Being the first state to launch the campaign to change direction statewide builds on that tradition of inclusiveness and reinforces New Hampshire's commitment to community-based mental health. But we all need to continue working together, state leaders, the healthcare community, businesses, law enforcement, nonprofits, communities and families to keep moving forward. And your continued advocacy and work to remove the stigma and increase understanding about mental illness will be critical to our progress. I want to thank, in particular, each and every person here and outside of this room who has had the courage to step forward and talk about the way a mental health challenge has affected them or their family, their business or their community. You have been true leaders in helping us all gain a better understanding of this illness, in helping reduce the stigma, and making sure that we continue to work together to treat this illness as an illness that can, in fact, be treated, an illness that people can live with and function with when it is appropriately treated and appropriately understood. So I thank each and every one of you. I thank each and every one of you for taking the step to do that. It has made a huge difference, and I am truly honored to join all of you today for the launch of Campaign to Change Direction New Hampshire. Thank you again for all your efforts to strengthen our mental health system. Have a good day.
Well, good morning. On behalf of the New Hampshire Senate, I would like to welcome you to the State House to join in this important public outreach. I have spent most of my time in Concord serving on committees which focus on our state's budget. During that time, I have heard countless debates over how we were to invest with our limited funds. This is a cause where the numbers truly add up. Given the higher number of adults who could be served throughout treatment of mental and emotional disorders, it only makes sense to raise our collective voices to ensure those in need are understood and get the help that needs to be available. Just as importantly, our state must act as one on mental health. The cost of not taking action to address mental health is too high. Unfortunately, we've seen the results too often on the nightly news when tragic events unfold with a link to mental illness or emotional suffering and distress. We can act together to decrease those incidents. It all starts with us. It is our collective responsibility to our family, our friends, and our coworkers to learn the signs of emotional suffering and to step in and help people in distress find and help them get the needs that they need. We can't be afraid of it. We need to acknowledge it. We can't be afraid to talk about it. We can't be afraid to act. It is my honor to stand before you representing the New Hampshire Senate in this worthy awareness effort. I wish all of you the best, and I pledge to be a voice of support with this campaign. On behalf of my House and Senate colleagues, I am pleased to introduce the co-chairs of the statewide awareness effort former New Hampshire Supreme Court Justice John Broderick, and Riverbank Community Health CEO Peter Evers. Congratulations.
I would say it's time. It's long past time. Mental illness has taken many of us in this room and those we love on a journey none of us could have ever expected. My family's been on a journey like many of you. And so I've learned the hard lessons, as has my son and my wife and my family. And I don't stand here today to be at all righteous, because if I could have, I would have hidden our family's problems too. I wasn't smart about mental health. My son suffered, and we suffered too. But what I do know from my work on this activity, which in some ways is the most important thing I have ever done, people are still hiding in the shadows. People are still ashamed. People are still fearful. You know it's true. It needs to change. We need to change direction on this issue. Barbara Van Dahlen, who's here today, it's her genius. It's her idea. You're the fruit of that idea. In 1957, and by the way, I remember 1957. It pains me to say it, but I actually do. And it was a very good year. I was much younger. My parents were both living. And I had almost no responsibility. That was a fabulous time. But in 1957, the only person who said the word breast publicly was Hugh Hefner at Playboy magazine. In 1957, in my childhood, people whispered the word cancer. I had a good friend, a childhood friend, whose mother was ill. I remember it like yesterday. And I was standing in the kitchen, just my mother and I said, "What's wrong with Jimmy's mother?" And she looked very pained that she was going to tell me something she didn't want to tell me. And she whispered, "She has cancer," like we might catch it if we spoke out loud. And some years later, somebody had the courage to link breast and cancer and find a color. I don't know about you, but I cannot look at the color pink without thinking about breast cancer. Last year, 250,000 women were diagnosed with breast cancer, and their outcomes are much better than they were 30 years ago. Last year, millions of Americans were hiding mental illness, and they're still hiding it. For things to change, we have to change it. We have to change it. We need to talk about it. We need to be honest about it. We need to educate people, Barbara Van Dalen's genius, about the signs of mental health problems. And then we need to act. And if we do, we will change in a fundamental way, not just those who are mentally ill, but all of those people who love those people who have mental illness. This is the most amazing room full of people I think I have ever talked to. Just the first row here is pretty extraordinary. But it goes much deeper than the first row. We have the faith community here. We have the business community here. We have the legislative community here. We have the mental health community here. We have the legal community here. We have members of the state Supreme Court here this morning and the Chief Judge of the Superior Court. This is a huge issue if we seize it, or we can let it pass. and let someone else do it after another generation of people have lived in the shadows and had broken lives and failed futures. Or we can act. Today's important. Tomorrow and the day after is more important. You are amazing people to be here today. Please be here tomorrow, too. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Peter Evans.
Follow that, as they say. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. We were a little bit worried in the early days that we had such big ideas that we wouldn't fill this chamber, but that was the one thing that drove our anxiety for a couple of months here, so thank you so much for coming. Your presence here not only helps to spread the word about the 5 signs and the help that's available from people from all walks of life, but it's so much more than that. By being here this morning, you're saying that the stigma around this conversation has to end. By being here, you're saying that you're willing to add your voices to the dialogue and do what you can to really help us change direction. For that, we're deeply appreciative. Riverbend is one of 10 community mental health centers in the Granite State, a collaboration that provides a network of responsive, accessible, and effective behavioral health services. We seek to sustain mental health and promote wellness, working together with our clients and our families. We view recovery and resiliency as an ongoing process in which choice, education, advocacy, and hope, above all, are key elements of mental wellness in our community. Riverbend is one of several agencies around New Hampshire poised to answer the call for help through this campaign. Help is out there, and treatment works. We will talk more about the process in a moment, but first I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. So let's get started. This is a message that we plan to spread throughout New Hampshire. As Justice Broderick said, this is the beginning of a year of forums and discussions to bring this into the light. We're pleased to have a few national and international figures joining this dialogue. But we also have local voices that will be heard on local media, raising awareness about the 5 signs. Barbara Van Dahlen is a pioneer. The daughter of a Vietnam-era soldier, Barbara came to understand in a deeply personal way the impact of war on families. Her mother suffered from mental illness even as her father worked through his own post-war challenges. Her older brother died when she was just 15 years old. Indeed, Barbara saw a lot at an early age, and it transformed her into an agent of change for good. Her personal experience, combined with the passion and energy of a force of nature, which you'll find out in a minute, Barbara founded Give an Hour, a non-profit national organization that offers free sessions to war veterans to help them address their traumatic experiences. From a small organization that started in 2005, Give an Hour now has nearly 7,000 volunteers who are more than willing to spare an hour of their week or their day to help soldiers cope with depression and anxiety. Her work has been praised by national leaders in the medical community. Barbara is one of Time magazine's most influential people from 2012. She is the founder of Change Direction, the next step in raising awareness and helping families connect with what they need to address mental conditions and emotional suffering. And she's teamed up with the White House and leaders on both sides of the political aisle to spread the word of hope, of help, and empowerment for all of us. Please welcome Barbara Van Dahlen.
Good morning. I am so honored and proud to be here today. And before I tell you my story, because we all have a story, some of us have several, I want to show you something very important. You've heard from John and Peter and Governor Hassan about the importance of this work and how different people are stepping up to acknowledge the importance of the work we're doing nationally, and indeed, after today, all of what's happening here in New Hampshire. So before I tell you my story, I want to show you the first champion for the campaign to change direction. Take a look.
Today, nearly 1 in 5 Americans are living with a mental health condition, from our children and grandparents to our veterans, co-workers, and neighbors. For all of us, our mental well-being is just as important as our physical health. But unfortunately, most of us don't know how to recognize the signs that someone is in emotional distress. And so many of those who are having difficulty can't get the help they need. Together, we can change this. We can start by visiting changedirection.org and learning the 5 signs that may mean someone is struggling and needs help. And then it's up to us to show compassion, to reach out, connect, help folks find the hope and the support they need. Together, we can change the story about mental health in America. Together, we can change direction.
So, that was a year ago, a little over a year ago. And let me tell you how that came to be and how I came to be standing here with you today. As you heard, my father served. He actually served in World War II, and my uncle served in Vietnam, and my nephew is currently serving.
On any given night,
Oops.
over.
That's okay. And my nephew is currently serving in the Navy. So I come from a long line of those who serve. As you also heard, soon after my father got out of the war during World War II, he came home to Los Angeles. He was a first-generation American who lied about his age to join the Navy after Pearl Harbor during World War II. And when he came home, he wanted what a lot of young GIs wanted. He wanted to get his family and build the American dream. So he picked up my family. At that point, it was my 3 older brothers and my mother, and moved to rural California. He didn't know that by moving my mother, it would trigger a psychotic break. She was later diagnosed as schizophrenia. I didn't see my mother for 43 years because although my dad did his best for 8 years to try to get her the help and care that she needed, back then, and sadly even still today, for someone with a diagnosis of schizophrenia, there just wasn't a lot to do. And so they eventually split up. My mother disappeared, fell through the cracks of society, and literally, I didn't see her for 43 years. My husband and I found her with the help of others in my family a little over a year ago, and I'm so proud and happy to say that now she's in a nursing home in Los Angeles, and we can help her during the last few years of her life. So fast forward, I did lose a brother when I was 15. It was very traumatic, and we had already had so much trauma in my family. But my dad, the veteran, who himself had come home with post-traumatic stress, but we didn't call it that. We didn't know what to call it. It wasn't talked about. But my dad was ever present to help me, help my brothers. So as I grew up, no surprise, I wanted to become a psychologist. I wanted to understand these issues. I wanted to understand how to help. I moved east to go to graduate school and I had finished my graduate work at the University of Maryland. I was raising 2 little girls. I was going through a very painful divorce because for a lot of us, when you have a lot of trauma early in life, it takes a while to figure out how to do healthy relationships, especially because we tend to not talk about what's happened to us, nor do we talk about the impact of what's happened to us on what we will do in the future. But again, back to me now in 2001, actually. I'm raising these 2 little girls. I'm a psychologist. I have a couple of offices. I'm doing work that I love. And I go home one day, I'm holding my 1-year-old, and I watch the Twin Towers fall on television. And I thought, oh my God, our world has changed forever. And indeed it was. I also thought, there's something that I can do. I'm a psychologist. I have skills. I can help. There was nowhere to put those skills. There was nowhere to help. And so that started to percolate in my brain I drove around a few years later with this idea as we started to hear about the men and women coming home from war with understandable consequences, post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, issues that we now expect to see in response to trauma. So as I was thinking about that and driving around in Bethesda, Maryland, which is just outside our nation's capital, my daughter, who was then 9, and my younger one was 5, we're driving in my van, and we see a homeless veteran on a street corner. And he's holding a sign that says, "Vietnam veteran, please help, God bless." And my 9-year-old, who never got to meet my dad because he passed away long before she was born, but she knew of his legacy and his story through me, she erupted with outrage, and she said, "Mom, how can we let this happen to these men who served our country?" And I thought, well, we can't, and I won't. And so that was the beginning, in 2005, of the organization that I am proud to lead to this day, Give an Hour. We provide free mental health care to those who serve their families and their communities. And we partner with about 200 organizations, state, local, national, because we believe that no one organization can do it alone, just like no one individual can change a culture alone. So we're building Give an Hour. It's going great. We're partnering with DOD and the VA and the Army Reserves and the National Guard, and all great things are happening as we're delivering more and more hours. To date, we've given 185,000 hours of free care to those who serve and their families, and we could not be prouder. But along the way, something started to percolate. You could tell I do this periodically where things percolate, and hopefully that will always continue to lead to big changes and new directions. So in this case, what became very clear to me is that we had this strange expectation for our service members and their families. How can we expect the men who served and the women who served our country to come home to our nation and raise their hand and say, "Excuse me, I have post-traumatic stress. Can you help me? Excuse me, I'm dealing with anxiety. My relationship is really in trouble." We don't do that. We don't do that in our culture. We don't talk about our emotional well-being the way we talk about our physical well-being. We talk about going to the dentist to get a root canal. I just had one a while ago. It's not very pleasant, but I certainly shared it with people. We talk about when we're on medication for a muscle pull because we're in pain, but we don't talk about if we're on sleep medication because maybe we experienced a trauma, maybe we have a death in our family and we're struggling. We don't do that. So in working with a number of people, my husband included, who's here today with me, who's been here every step of the way, he's also a psychologist, also had members of his family serve and affected by mental health issues. We put together a steering committee. It didn't take us long before we became aware if we're ever going to ensure that we take care of those who serve and their families and all of us who are affected by mental health. And I'm going to pause for a minute because I really, really believe, and you're going to help me test this, is there anyone in this chamber who has not been touched, either personally, family, or friends, by a mental health issue? Exactly. We all have, and we all have many stories because it's part of being human. It's not a veteran issue, it's not a military issue, it is a human issue. Our emotional health and our physical health are part of us, our spiritual health. The 3 parts of us work together. And so we decided, well then, we have to change the culture. We have to make it possible for people to speak openly, to share, to get help easily. And the way we decided to do that was to create a common language. You heard John talk, he talks so eloquently. He's such an important spokesperson for this movement. You heard him talk about the pink of breast cancer. Well, I'm going to give you another example that I think you will all resonate with. I can't remember. It's been a part of me for as long as I can remember. But I know the signs of a heart attack. If someone in this chamber right now started to complain of chest pains, shortness of breath, they felt like an elephant was sitting on their chest, their arm was hurting, we would all say, oh my gosh, this person might be having a heart attack. And we would do what? We'd act. We'd call 911. If there was a doctor in the house, in this house there's probably several, they'd all rush in to assist. We would take action. We would know that the thing to do is to reach out and connect. We don't have anything like that in the emotional well-being space. And we need to move away. Just like with that example, we don't have to be a cardiologist to step in to help. We know what to do. We act. We get help. Similarly, we don't have to be a mental health professional to know what to do if you see one of the 5 signs of emotional suffering. The thing to do, as you heard the First Lady say, reach out, connect, offer help. If we start there, if we become part of the solution, it doesn't matter if the person is struggling with post-traumatic stress or depression, schizophrenia, as in my mother's case, or substance abuse, traumatic brain injury. It doesn't matter because all those things lead to emotional pain and suffering. And shouldn't we step in to help those we love and ourselves? And one size doesn't fit all. Maybe that person is struggling and therapy is incredibly important. Maybe they're going to find that it's meditation or yoga or prayer is what they need. Our goal with this campaign is to make sure that everyone pays attention to their emotional well-being. That's where we start. We pay attention to our physical well-being. Bruce Springsteen, don't know if there are any Bruce Springsteen fans in here, but I am. So Bruce Springsteen, who definitely is not only an icon, but he speaks for a whole generation about things that, the common language. He said once about his own mental health care. He said, it's like taking my car into the garage. I take that into the garage for periodic checkups. Shouldn't I take myself in? I thought that was brilliant. It makes it understandable for all of us. So you're going to see a lot and hear a lot about those 5 signs, but I just want to make sure we all know what they are. They are personality change. When somebody is going through painful things, their personality will change. You will say as you observe them. And if you think about people who have struggled and suffered, you have said about them to yourself or others, they're not the same. They're not the person they used to be. Agitation. Agitation could be anger, explosive anger. My dad, as a veteran who came home with post-traumatic stress, he would explode and then he would apologize saying, it's not you. I don't know what this is. It can also be anxiety, pacing the floor, somebody who's having a psychotic break, who's having a bipolar manic episode, who's addicted to drugs, agitation, withdrawal. We're not talking about everybody needs to be like me, outgoing and bubbly and perky. It's withdrawal from your own social interactions. You'll notice it when it happens. Lack of personal care. Somebody who drinks too much, who isn't sleeping, who isn't caring for themselves. And finally, hopelessness. There are other signs, but if you see these 5 in any combination, or you see a couple of them, now you know that's not just some random blip. Something's going on, and even if you ask that person and they initially say, go away, leave me alone, that doesn't mean that you should give up. You may need to come back. You may need to involve other friends. You wouldn't walk away if they were bleeding. Why would you walk away if they're hurting but they can't let you know they need help? Along the way, we have been incredibly blessed. We met John Broderick, who has become, as I said, an amazing speaker and champion. Peter Evers, Bill Gunn, who helped us all get together. John immediately said, we are going to do this here. We need to do this here. We've been fortunate that we've had other champions, and they've gotten involved because their slice of this issue is a little different than the general, or maybe it is the broad, as you saw with the First Lady. Now we're going to see a PSA from another one of our champions who got involved because we can prevent homelessness if we recognize the 5 signs and step in before people fall through the cracks. Take a look.
On any given night, over 500,000 Americans are homeless. If you look at them, if you see them, you'll see that they're all just like us. They're mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, and children. They're people who can't afford housing, men and women struggling with mental illness or substance abuse, or veterans just trying to get home. People are escaping violence. They're desperate and in need of a break. Homelessness doesn't just happen. People struggle. They run out of options. Friends and family may not recognize the signs or know what to do about it. We are making progress to end homelessness, but we can do more. We can prevent people from becoming homeless. We can start by learning the 5 signs of emotional suffering that tell us someone's hurting. And then it's up to us to care, to reach out and offer to help. Visit changedirection.org to learn more.
So you can see, people are stepping up because they recognize, like all of you, because that's why you came, like John and Peter, my husband, the governor, our distinguished guest senators, congresswomen, congressmen, members of the faith community, the corporate folks who have joined our campaign, because it is all of us. And if there's any doubt that learning these 5 signs makes a difference, I want to end, before I show you one last PSA, I want to end with a very personal story about these 5 signs. So as we were building this campaign, my husband and I share now 2 beautiful daughters. They're now aged 20 and 15. When we were building this campaign 2 years ago, my youngest daughter was then around 13, and we would take the 5 signs, the language of the 5 signs, and we'd pass it to the 2 girls. We'd say, go take this out to your friends. We want to make sure that they make sense. We want to make sure that the language fits, that you all can understand these terms. And they were great. They came back, they tweaked a few things, and so they were very helpful. And as we approached the national launch, as you can imagine, our house was a bit intense. We're going to have the First Lady and a big, huge, group of folks and all these things going on. And so my husband and I were pretty distracted, but my daughters have learned that when something is important, they know they can get our attention. Our youngest one, Mira, came and plopped down in my chair one day, right before we were heading into the launch. And she said, Mommy, can I talk to you? And I said, sure, honey, what's up? And of course, my mind is like, okay, we got the First Lady coming in with security details, but I'm paying attention, I really was. And she says, you know my friend Ava down the street? And I said, yeah, honey, we know Ava. We love Ava. You're at her house all the time. She said, well, I was down there the other day, and we were hanging out, talking, and she said, and Ava said, would you go get that book out of my drawer? And I went over to the drawer, this is Mira talking, and I opened the drawer, and I saw a razor blade in the drawer. And Mira, my little one, who is not the bubbly, outgoing one, she's much more thoughtful and reserved, and she looked at that and she said, I thought, what is going on? And she said, and then I remembered the 5 signs. And I thought, Ava's been different lately. She hasn't been herself. She's been kind of irritable at school. She's pulled away from the friend group, and she hasn't been taking care of herself. And she said, so I went over to her with the razor blade, and I said, what's this? And Ava started crying, and Mira started crying, and they talked about talking to her mom, and they did. A month later, right after we launched, once again, Mira comes and plops down in the chair, and she said, Mommy, Ava's going to go see her counselor for the first time today, and she's going to text me to let me know whether she likes her. That is the power of learning these signs. If a 13-year-old girl can recognize and step in to let her friend know, I see you are hurting and I want to help, we can all learn them too. As I said before, this is not a military issue, it is not a veteran issue, it is not a New Hampshire issue, it is not an American issue, it is a human issue. The last PSA that I'm going to show you is connected to our military and veteran. This is a champion who we've gotten to work with recently, and I'm also going to show you before I show you the PSA. You all probably cannot see this, but this appeared in USA Today. This is a full-page ad that says, "We know the 5 signs, do you?" This is Prince Harry, Dr. Biden, and the First Lady. This appeared in USA Today all weekend. So as we began doing this work, what we found is that, yes, we've stepped into a moment in time. We as a nation, we as a country, we as, I think, a world are beginning to grapple with and take this on to address. And so we are very proud that Prince Harry has stepped up to also join this effort. The last thing I want to show you today is something that we believe is going to help amplify all the work we're doing. It's already moving across the pond, as they say, as the Prince and also Prince William and Kate have joined Prince Harry in raising awareness. They launched an initiative called Heads Together about 2 weeks ago, and we are working closely with them. And this morning, I sent to the head of the Royal Foundation, guess where I am today? I'm in New Hampshire for the first state launch. Those folks in New Hampshire go again, being the first. So let me show you. So I will close by showing you one more PSA, and we are excited because all 3 of these that you have seen, we hope will soon be appearing on New Hampshire television stations as this first state continues to push this out. Take a look.
Men and women who serve our countries protect and defend us. Sometimes they come home with physical wounds, sometimes they suffer from invisible injuries. Mental health is a sensitive subject, but it doesn't need to be. We need to talk about it more. We need to learn how to recognize the signs that someone is in emotional pain. And we need to do more when we see it. Mental health is not just a concern for those who served, but those of us who have served can take the lead. We can start by learning the 5 signs that tell us that someone we love may be suffering. And then it's up to us to reach out, connect, and offer to help. To learn more, visit changedirection.org.
Thank you so much for coming today, and thank you for all you are going to do to help us change direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Truly inspirational. I couldn't help feeling like I'd heard that accent before with the last guy. He's a relative of mine, but I don't talk about it. So you've seen the 5 signs, and you've had a glimpse at our media launch. Barbara went over the 5 signs here, but I would draw your attention to the little emoticons here. The great thing about this is it's truly clinically indicated in neurovegetative signs of depression, but it's very understandable for anybody who looks at it. So again, what a wonderful idea. You'll be hearing more about this from us on radio stations and TV over the next 6 months all over New Hampshire. I'd like to thank our media partners, Binny Media, WGIR, and WMUR for stepping up early and aggressively to help us spread the word on the campaign. So now you might ask, okay, Peter, you've got our attention. We know the signs now. What do we do? Well, our goal from now, as John said earlier, is to drive action. If you could go to our website, changedirection.org/New Hampshire, there you'll find reference materials and information about treatments and ways to start the conversation with family, friends, and co-workers. In addition, we're working in partnership with 211 and the Granite United Way. People can call this statewide line and be connected to local mental health providers to begin conversations about what to do next. All of this is designed to ensure we chase away the shadows that shroud behavioral health. And we talk about it in a way that we might talk about other sports-related injuries, like a twisted knee or a diagnosed illness that requires immediate medical treatment. This will undoubtedly lead us to meaningful conversations and new approaches to treatment and expanding services, and all of this is important and extraordinarily necessary. But the first step is to recognize the signs and connect people to help that is available.
Having this many national and state leaders in one row at one time is like landing jumbo jets at Logan Airport. These are busy people. And so I want them to know that we know it isn't easy for you to be here. And I know that's especially true for Congresswoman Kuster and Congressman Frank Guinta, who are flying out of Manchester at 12:15. Not that they'd hold it against me if they missed their plane. But the Speaker of the House is here today with a lot of conference committee work, and the President of the Senate and Governor Hassan is always busy. So I want you to know how much it means to us that you came. And I also want you to know how important you are to this effort, both here in New Hampshire and nationally. And that's true for the Speaker and the Senate President. So what we'd like to do, keeping in mind you're busy people, is to ask all of you to come up. We'd like to give you a token of our appreciation, and we'd like to ask Senator Shaheen, Congresswoman Kuster, and Congressman Guinta, and Bud Fitch, who's here for Sendayat. And by the way, I want to say this. Sendayat has been a big supporter of what we're doing, and she told me personally, whatever you need me to do, John, I'm going to do it. And she would have been here, so her absence should not be taken as a lack of interest whatsoever. So if you would all come up, we'd like to present you with a plaque and let you speak so I can get those who need to leave to leave.
Well, Governor Hassan, Mr. Speaker, Senate President Morse, my colleagues from the House, and Bud Fitch, representing Senator Ayotte. You can tell the plaque part wasn't rehearsed. I'm really honored to be here, to be given this plaque, to be here with so many of you as we start the Change the Direction campaign in New Hampshire. And thank you, Dr. Van Dahlen, for those very inspiring remarks and for your leadership of this campaign. And of course, thank you to former Justice John Broderick, to Peter Evers for your tremendous leadership, for making New Hampshire the first state to launch a statewide campaign. And you know, I think it's fitting that we are the first state because many of you in this room remember that we were the first state to pass mental health parity for biologically based mental illnesses to make sure that insurance covered mental health issues, and many of you in this room were responsible for making that happen. You know, in 1999, the U.S. Surgeon General labeled stigma as perhaps the biggest barrier to mental health care. And from my perspective as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I have tremendous admiration for the military's robust efforts to break down that stigma and to persuade service members to seek treatment when they need it. As we all know, our armed forces face an enormous challenge with the invisible wounds of war. PTSD is epidemic, and it's a national tragedy that on average 22 veterans take their own lives every day. So thank you to Barbara for all of your efforts to set up that first campaign, Give an Hour, to help our veterans. Because surveys show that post-9/11 warriors acknowledge that PTSD and other mental wounds are legitimate wounds of war. And yet fully 80% say that embarrassment, shame, and employment concerns are barriers to seeking treatment. No, I think in many ways the military is a microcosm of our larger society where we face these same stubborn barriers. And this is a particularly important issue as we face the epidemic of opioid and heroin abuse in New Hampshire. Because we know that so many people who are substance abusers also have mental health issues, and that if we're to be successful in addressing those substance abuse issues, we also have to address the mental health issues. And recognizing the signs and early diagnosis of treatment are critical to making sure that people suffering from mental illness can lead productive lives. And we saw a very dramatic example of that last week when we saw the shooting of 2 police officers in Manchester. Mayor Gatzis understood very clearly what happened there, and we saw that the young man who was responsible he was mentally ill. And we heard his father say, you know, the mental health system failed my son. And that's what this campaign is all about. It's making sure that we don't fail the sons and daughters, husbands and wives, family members, friends in the state of New Hampshire, that they get the help that they need. And we should do this not just because it's the right thing to do for those people and their families, but we should do it because it's the cost-effective thing to do. You know, I always say if you won't do it because it's the right thing to do, you got to do it because it's the economic thing to do. Right now, mental health disorders are the top costliest medical illness in this country, beating even heart disease. So this is an issue that's important for us to address. And when each of us breaks down the stigma and silence surrounding mental illness, we participate in addressing the problem. Gandhi urged us to be the change you want to see in the world. Every time we have an open, straightforward conversation about mental illness, as we're doing today, we break down that stigma, we help address this challenge, and we make the world better. So thank you to everyone who's here for this Change Direction campaign. We are going to be successful in New Hampshire, and we are going to fight every day to break down the stigma surrounding mental illness. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Shaheen, for your remarks. Thank you for all that you're doing, Barbara, to bring this issue to the attention of the country, and I'm so proud to have New Hampshire be the first. Thank you to my dear, dear friend John Broderick, and to Peter Evers, and to all the electeds who have come together, and to all the families and treatment providers who are here with us today. I'm going to start by just briefly saying that New Hampshire is leading the way in Congress right now on the opiate epidemic. Senator Shaheen, Senator Ayotte, Mr. Guinta, and myself. In the House, Senator Shaheen and Senator Ayotte were critical in passing the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. In this House, Mr. Guinta and I started a bipartisan congressional task force to combat the heroin epidemic, and we've worked tirelessly. And 2 weeks ago, the House passed 18 bills in a bipartisan way. But to make the connection to what we're all gathered here today, last week, Mr. Guinta and I presided over a public hearing in Congress. 150 families, including 5 families from New Hampshire who had lost loved ones to heroin and to opiates, came to Washington to tell their personal stories. And for 3.5 hours, we sat and we listened. We listened to a 12-year-old boy talk about his mom. We listened to countless parents talk about losing their beautiful sons and daughters. And virtually every one of those families talked about underlying mental health issues, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, traumatic brain injury that had been undiagnosed or untreated at the time. And so this is a critical issue for us to come together. I want to make this very personal. I come from a long line of people who care about this issue. My great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather ran the New Hampshire State Hospital for 60 years together. Back then, they didn't have the psychotropic medication, they didn't have the mental health therapies, but they knew what made people feel better. They took them outdoors, they fed them good food, they were compassionate, they did what they could. My other grandparents were involved in the founding of Child and Family Services of New Hampshire, and they told me stories about how they went out to find family members literally living in barns. Families had no choice, and they brought them to Concord, and they tried to give them compassionate care. Fast forward, my father was a World War II veteran, a fighter pilot shot down in the Battle of the Bulge, a POW for 6 months, came home, raised 5 children. We didn't know about PTSD. We didn't know what that was. And until I served on the Veterans Affairs Committee and my husband and I began to honestly talk about our fathers and the trauma that they had been through, and we began to meet families, we didn't know. And we didn't know everything there was to know about mental health. When I was 12 years old, my nephew was born. He was a beautiful boy, a great, great hockey player. He was cute, he was fun, he was smart, he was funny. Later in his life, he ran into some very serious challenges. And we've all come to cope with this. We've all come to learn. But I'm just going to share one quick story. We're at the wedding of my niece a couple of years ago. My nephew now hears voices. He lives in a very challenging way. And we were sitting together. I wanted to try to help his anxiety during the ceremony. He was agitated. He was worked up. And I said, Eric, it's fine. I'm right here with you. He said, Annie, if the voices get too loud, will you tell me we'll need to leave? And I said, we're good with that. We've got a plan. We're going to go stand in the back of the room. And the ceremony was mercifully short. My niece knew how hard this would be. And he kept the voices really quiet. And he was talking the whole time, but it didn't disrupt anything. And at the end, the bride went out, the party went out, all was well. And I leaned over and I said to Eric, you did great, you did great. And he looked at me with clear eyes and he said, didn't you think that was a marvelous ceremony? And I realized he's in there. He is in there. And so I'll close with this. Many of you knew my mother, State Senator Susan McLean. She loved this place right here. She spent 25 years of her life here. And at the end of her life, she had Alzheimer's disease for the last 5 years. And here's what I remember she would say at the end. She couldn't walk, she couldn't talk, and she had one thing left to say. She said, I can't speak, but I can listen. And we just carry that in our hearts. So whoever you love and whatever their challenge is, they're in there. And you love them and they love you. Learn the 5 signs. Speak up, make a difference. We can change this, and we're all working hard to do it. Thank you.
Is it good morning? Good morning. Still good morning. My name is Frank Guinta. I represent the 1st Congressional District. I want to thank all of you for being here today, and particularly Justice Broderick and Peter Evans for co-chairing this effort. I want to thank the delegation, Senator Shaheen, Senator Ayotte, and my friend Ann Kuster for being here and speaking so eloquently and personally and passionately about the challenges that she and her family have gone through. Governor Hassan, thank you. And to all of the state legislators, the Executive Council, and members from our community who are here today. There's one thing that I very much like about New Hampshire. When we face a problem, we can come together to find a solution. Mental health has been a battle for years, long before I started serving in this very chamber. As a matter of fact, I remember a day when I was
in a hearing at municipal, county, and government where somebody was testifying about those people. And that individual was referencing people who had mental health diagnoses. And I remember sitting there being angry and frustrated because for the last 20 years of my life, I have been the direct caregiver of a family member of mine who has a very unique and challenging mental health diagnosis. Our family has gone through years of personal challenge. We have tried to help others who have been in the same circumstance. As a matter of fact, and the Chief Justice doesn't know this because I've never told him, but when I was sworn in as mayor of Manchester, I asked him to swear me in not because he was the Chief Justice, but because of what he had gone through and what his family had gone through, because we had a personal connection. And it was nice to know that there were people in our state who understood what I was going through and what my family was going through. So a few years back, I decided to start thinking more out loud and talking more publicly about the challenges that my family has gone through. Because we need to speak up. There is a stigma that still exists with those who have a mental health diagnosis. And as far as I can tell, no one with a mental health diagnosis ever asked to be sick. They never asked to be looked upon as second-class citizens. They struggle each and every day with their own demons and challenges, not knowing who to ask or look for help. Sometimes even their own family members, they don't want to seek out help. And I've had lots of conversations with lots of people over the years about how to fix this problem, and it's tough. There's no question about it. There are moments in my life when I was mayor or as a member of Congress where I've had to call upon police departments or mental health professionals to help my family member. And they've served admirably, and they've helped in a way that I could never thank them. But it's not just about my family member, it's about the thousands of people in our state that suffer on a regular basis in an emergency room, waiting for a bed in Concord. It's about the individual who's trying to reach out to their community-based physician and can't get access because there are so many that we're trying to help. In Washington, we spend about $130 billion a year, and it's not enough. It's not spent efficiently, it's not spent properly, and I see it firsthand. So I'm co-sponsoring the Help Families Act, which is a bill led by a gentleman by the name of Tim Murphy, a member of Congress who's a physician, and we are going to continue to focus on what we can do collectively, not just at the national level, but at the state and local level. And I hope that this campaign begins to shed some light on the immediate necessity that we have to help those who have a mental health diagnosis. Because there are so many who have been fighting for so many years and have not been heard. So I'd like to close by saying to my friend Ken Norton, who's sitting right here, it's about time. And we are here, and we are going to fight this fight very publicly. Thank you all very much for being here, and thank you for your service to this issue.
Good morning. I'm pleased to bring this message from United States Senator Kelly Ayotte. I'm pleased to support Change Direction New Hampshire and all who are committed to changing the culture of mental health in New Hampshire. We must help everyone learn the 5 signs that may mean someone is in emotional pain and might need help. Knowing when to help someone recognize the need for mental health care and how to get them connected to help needs to become as universally understood as knowing the signs of a heart attack and how to dial 911. I'm proud to have introduced the bipartisan Mental Health First Aid Act of 2015, which would provide support for training programs to help the public identify, understand and address crisis situations in a safe and appropriate manner. This bill calls for teaching the warning signs and risk factors of common mental health disorders, teaching crisis de-escalation techniques, and providing trainees with an action plan to help an individual in mental health crisis to connect to professional mental health care in the community. As a state and as a nation, we have an opportunity to help each other better understand and respond to mental illness. We must eliminate the stigma of mental illness, which for too many interferes with seeking timely treatment. Change Direction New Hampshire is an important public education program that can help New Hampshire take a significant step forward in addressing mental illness in our communities. Please join in learning, teaching, and using the 5 signs. Sincerely, Kelly Ayotte, United States Senator.
Thank you so much. Along with the work that's been done on behalf by our state and federal level to enhance and improve treatment and care, it's also important to note some of the work that's been done in our communities. One of the earliest partners to join this awareness campaign came from the college campus, a place we consider to be of paramount importance for spreading the word about the 5 signs and raising awareness among young adults that help us out there, and you're never needing to go it alone. The University of New Hampshire's Counseling Center has been our partner since April of 2015, and they've already done a great deal of work to spread the word about the 5 signs, making sure that all students are aware of the resources that are available to them. The center's team is also working to share this campaign with similar agencies on campuses all around New Hampshire. We thank them for their passion and hard work. It's that type of effort that we ask of all of you today, for it is the best way to connect with a broad population of people. And also in the business community, if I could take a second, there are shining examples of leadership on mental health and on making sure the workforce offers the support and care necessary for anybody who is suffering emotionally. For example, Riverbend has worked for years alongside Lowe's Home Improvement Centers, and they are a shining example of a company that has created a corporate culture of awareness around the importance of stress management, mental health, and connecting people to various resources in ways that are very supportive to all of their employees. This is the goal of this campaign, to ensure that no matter when somebody needs help, and no matter where they work, live, or spend their free time, that help is readily available, and there is somebody close by to talk to without the stigma or shame and embarrassment. We salute those who are leading by example, and we encourage everybody to look at ways in which they can raise awareness of the 5 signs and how to connect people with resources in New Hampshire.
I promise you I'm the last speaker, and I'll be brief. One of the things that mental illness has not had is a color. It has one now. And when you leave here, there are bracelets just like this outside, and it says change direction. I hope you'll take one. I hope you'll wear one proudly. There's literature outside. I hope you'll take it. And there are posters outside with the 5 signs, and I hope you'll take them and display them. Whatever happens tomorrow, today will be memorable, historic in some ways, but it won't be consequential. It won't matter unless you leave here and make it matter. This is a long slog, folks, to get to where we need to go. And it's easy to retreat. It's easy to feel that awkwardness again. But let me close with some basic statistics that I think should tell you why your voices matter. Half of all mental illness in the United States arises by age 14. My own son was 13, and my wife and I never saw it for what it was. He had a right for us to know it. We didn't see it. 2/3 of all mental illness, 2/3 of all mental illness in the United States arises by age 24. And the mentally ill, by the way, are the last to know they had mental illness. Why would they know? Why would they know? Last year, in the United States, more people died from suicide than died on America's highways. And it was a 30-year high for suicides in America. Not a mystery why that's happening. It's happening in the shadows. We need to find those folks in a loving, caring, thoughtful way, and we need to retrieve their futures, not attend their funerals. That's why it matters. The leading cause of disability in the United States and Canada is mental illness. I'll bet nobody knew that here. Barbara Van Dahlen did, and a few others. Most didn't. Why is that? Because we're afraid to talk about it. We need to all grow up. There are people outside this building by the thousands who need your help and your voice. I'll know that we're making progress in the first in the nation state when parents are talking to their 12 and 13 and 14-year-old children about feelings or experiences that they should tell their parents about. I'll bet that conversation happens nowhere in New Hampshire because we don't know what to tell them, and we don't know what to do if they're telling us. Knowledge is our friend. There are lives to be saved and changed. And I don't say that to you as someone speaking from a position of righteousness. I failed my own son because I didn't know. Don't do that. It's your job to find out. Take a bracelet, wear it proudly, spread the word, and change direction. Thank you very much.